The brake lights on I-94 made a red ribbon through the cold. Our windshield kept fogging where my breath touched the glass, and Jack wiped a circle clear with 2 knuckles from his scarred hand. His cuff was too stiff. The collar of his white shirt rubbed his neck where the burn met the line of his jaw. He tugged it once and let his hand fall to his lap. "Call him," I asked. "He knows," Jack said. The wipers ticked. "He knows we are stuck." Winnetka sat ahead like a postcard. On the screen of my phone, Ethan's last text glowed blue. "No rush, Mom. Drive safe." I watched the Red Sea start to loosen and pressed my heel into the mat. The air vent was set too hot and smelled faintly of dust. Outside, exhaust made low clouds that drifted back across the lanes. We turned off at Lake Cook Road. The houses grew larger and cleaner as we crept under bare trees. Lights in the windows were soft and yellow. Someone had lit a fire somewhere. The smoke had a sweet edge like burnt sugar. Jack drummed a slow rhythm on the steering wheel without meaning to. The skin of his right hand was a pale map of rough rivers and islands. "Wine," he said quietly. "We should have brought wine." "Last time she said that made us predictable," I said. Before that she said flowers clashed with her palate. He nodded once. He had shaved. I could see where the razor had caught along the old scar and left a tiny red nick already dry. Ethan's house was white with black shutters and a stone path that had been swept clean. A brass sign by the doorbell read, "No shoes inside." Through a bay window, I could see a tree done in gold and white, and beyond that, a long table with candles, napkins standing like little sails. The kitchen window was cracked open an inch. Cold slipped out and hit my face when I stepped up on the front stoop. "Ready," I said. It was a question I could not make easier for him. He had his hand on the bell when we heard her voice. The open kitchen window let it out bright and flat. "I still cannot believe you want him at the head," Brooke said. "It kills the appetite. Those marks, people will stare. We always end up with leftovers because your father looks like a cautionary photo." Ethan's reply was lower and tired. "He is my dad." I felt Jack go still beside me. Not angry, not anything I could name. The kind of still that happens before a glass breaks, when all the air decides to hold itself very carefully between 2 things. My finger hovered over the bell and did not press. "Your mother is at least presentable," Brooke went on. "She talks about volunteer shifts too much, but at least she does not make the room seize up. Seat him at the far end. Tell him the light is better there." The kitchen smoke alarm did a single chirp from somewhere inside that lonely little bird a battery gives when it wants attention. It made the hairs on my arms rise. "Brooke," Ethan said, "stop!" The sound of tires on snow made us turn. A silver Mercedes slid into the curb behind us. Doors opened tasteful clicks, not slams. A tall man with silver hair stepped out, straightening the cuff of a gray coat. A woman in a red dress tucked her gloved hand into his elbow and smiled a small, polite smile at us strangers at her daughter's door. "Conrad," she said, "we beat traffic for once." Then the man's eyes found Jack. It was not a double take, it was a stop. He took one step, then another, and the color went out of his face, as if the cold had reached him all at once. He closed his hand around the woman's forearm and did not seem to feel her flinch. "Conrad," she said, "what is it?" He was not looking at her. He was looking at the pattern that began on Jack's knuckles and ran under the sleeve. He lifted his hand almost as if to reach out, then thought better of it as if the skin were sacred, or maybe it burned to touch. "I know those scars," he said almost to himself. The red-dressed woman blinked. "How could you possibly know him?" Before any of us could say the thing that wanted to come, the door opened. Warm light spilled out. The smell of rosemary and ham and cinnamon moved like a soft hand into the cold. Brooke filled the doorway in a cream sweater and a hostess smile that lived at the corners and not in her eyes. "Mom, Dad, you are early," she said, then saw us on the stoop. "Nora, Jack, you are finally here." I stepped past her smile and into the heat. The open window pulled at the back of my neck the way a draft finds every loose thread. Ethan came out of the kitchen in an apron that said Grill Master. He looked like my boy and like a man who had not slept well in months. His face changed when he saw his father. Relief, some real joy, the way shoulders drop when a weight is set down. "Hey," he said. He hugged me first and held on longer than usual when he hugged Jack. "Traffic." "Special," Jack said. Behind us, the silver-haired man still stood on the threshold. He had not come in. Brooke's smile faltered. "Dad," he stepped forward finally. He reached his hand out to Jack the way one reaches to touch something fragile in a museum. Their palms met. His grip tightened. I saw Jack brace in that old way, the one he uses when a stranger asks what happened. "Where did you get them?" the man said. The room woke around his voice. The clink of plates in the kitchen stopped. The Christmas music, some old crooner, seemed to fade. "Conrad," the red-dressed woman hissed. "Please." "I need to know," the man said. His eyes were full of something I did not have a name for. Not curiosity, not horror. Something like hunger and grief and recognition intertwined. "A fire," Jack said. He did not whisper, but it felt like a whisper. "I was 15. "Where?" the man said. "What kind of fire?" "That is not how we greet people," Brooke said, bright and thin. "Let us sit down and we can talk after dessert." "August," the man said the syllables landing one by one. "Chicago, Pilsen, 3rd floor back stair." No one breathed. Jack stared at him. His jaw shifted once, a small movement like someone swallowing hard. The kitchen alarm chirped again from the other room. "How did you know that?" Jack said. It was not a question with teeth. It was just a string of words that could not find any other way out. The man's eyes filled. He did not blink it away. It arrived and sat there. "Because I was there," he said. "You carried me out." Elise, I would later learn her name, put a hand flat against Conrad's chest. "Conrad," she said softly and then louder because he did not move. "Conrad." He let go of Jack's hand. His fingers were trembling. He reached into his coat as if he had lost something and wanted to find it. He pulled out nothing and then looked up at the ceiling as if there might be a sentence written there that could steady him. Brooke had her hostess smile back on. It looked brittle now. She stepped side to side, her gaze pinballing from her father to Jack to the kitchen archway. Her hair was perfect. A thin bead of sweat gleamed on the bridge of her nose. "Ethan," she said, "can you bring the salad? Mom-Dad come in, it is freezing." Conrad did not move forward. He looked at Jack the way a person looks at a photograph they thought had burned years ago. Then he said it again, slower, tasting each word, as if to be sure it was not wrong. "August, Pilsen, 3rd floor back stair." Brooke found her smile again and moved aside. We slipped our shoes off under the brass sign and stepped onto slate that held the cold like a memory. The kitchen window stayed open that inch. It pulled the warm air in a thin stream toward the dark. I could hear the faint tick of the smoke alarm a single chirp every few minutes the way a bird calls to itself. Ethan took Conrad by the elbow and guided him in. Elise smoothed the red dress over her knees as if smoothing a tablecloth. She looked at me with a question in her eyes that had more to do with her husband than with holiday manners. "Sit," Brooke said. "Please, we are already behind." She walked quickly, placing things that were already placed. Napkins that stood like sails shifted 3 inches. A stack of plates centered again. The long table ran the length of the front room. Candles and glass chimneys threw doubles of themselves into the windows. Jack sat where the card said head. He did not touch the card. Ethan poured water. The pitcher sweated. He tallied who needed ice without asking. He kept looking at Jack and then at Conrad as if seeing a new family tree being drawn right on top of the old one. "Mr. Davenport," he said, trying for light, "you made it." Conrad's eyes were still glossy. He nodded and folded his hands, then unfolded them. His gaze drifted back to Jack's right hand where the skin changed at the cuff. There was no keeping the story off the table. It had already taken a chair. The first course came out a salad that looked like a magazine. Pears, walnuts, something white and soft that held the shape of the spoon. Brooke placed a plate in front of Jack and set the fork at a perfect angle. "We can talk after dessert," she said. "There is nothing that cannot wait for dessert." Conrad said nothing. He picked up the fork, then set it down and looked at Ethan. "Your father," he said slowly, each word placed so it would not slide away, "was in a fire when he was 15. Ethan nodded carefully. "Yes." "In Chicago," Conrad said. "In Pilsen." Jack lifted his water and took a sip. The glass left a round star on the wood. "Yes." "What happened?" Elise whispered. Not a demand. She did not look at Brooke for permission. Jack shifted shoulders tight against the chair back. He kept his eyes on the water. Rooming house, candles for light, someone knocked one over, old varnish on the floors, it went up quick. Conrad closed his eyes and saw whatever he had to see. The hallway was already full, he said. I remember the sound, a roar but low like a big animal growling from under you. I put my shirt over my face. The window would not open. Then there was a kid in the doorway who should not have been able to be in a doorway at all. Jack's mouth twitched like he was trying on a smile, and it did not fit. Backstairs, he said. I did not know you. You did not know me. I put you on my shoulder. We went down the back. The stairs dropped, Conrad said, eyes open again, now voice steadying because the end of the sentence had always waited. We hit the bottom at the right second. And then the ceiling came, Jack said. He held his napkin too tight. It put small white crescents in his palm. I pushed you out the back door. I heard sirens. I ran. He let go of the napkin, and it unfolded itself like a slow breath. Elise stared at him as if she were trying to see 15 under the man. You were a child, she said. I was a poor child, Jack said, and his voice went bare. Poor kids do not call attention to themselves at scenes of fires. That is what my father taught me. The only sound was the Christmas music from the other room, a record that had slid into the same song twice and no one had noticed until now. Brooke stood with her hands on the back of her chair and her hostess smile wanting to hold. She spoke to the room in a tone that tried to throw a cloth over the whole thing. I think we should eat while it is hot. We have ham, and the potatoes are perfect. We can share stories after. Brooke, Ethan said quietly, please sit. We ate because that is what people do when there is too much to say. Forks moved, but not much left plates. Jack cut a corner of ham to be polite and took it like medicine. The candles shook in their glass and then settled. Conrad would not stop looking, but he did it with a gentleness that kept it from being a stare. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. I tried to find you, he said to Jack. For years, private ads, local news. It turned me into a person who talks to every young man he sees in case a voice matches a memory that already had smoke around it. Jack swallowed. He had always hated being made into a story. He shifted his chair a little back so he could see Ethan better. You do not have to find me, he said. I am right here. Brooke's spoon clinked too loud against a bowl. She stood so quickly her chair scraped the hardwood with a bark. I will check the pie. Ethan did not stand. He watched her go, and the look on his face was new on him. It was not anger. It was something that had learned anger and moved past it to a kind of clarity. After coffee and a dessert, no one tasted, people went home. Elise hugged me at the door. She held on longer than a first hug should. Conrad shook Jack's hand a second time and whispered something I did not catch, and I do not think Jack did either. Brooke saw them out and came back to the sink and turned on the water too hot. Steam rose and fogged the window she had not closed. The chirp came again and again, no one got a ladder. In the quiet, after I looked at the long table with the card that still said head, I put it in my pocket and did not explain why. The week that followed stretched. Jack went to the garage when he could not sleep and planned oak until curls of pale wood lay around his boots like snowdrifts. He had started a bookshelf with a top rail he meant to carve. He drew tiny pencil constellations on the edge. He said it would be for Ava even before he said her name. I called Elise. I told myself I would apologize for the mess at her first meeting with us. I told myself I would ask if Conrad was all right. When she answered, I could hear a kettle somewhere far away and the sound of a large room. I need to ask you something, I said. Brooke knew about the fire before Christmas. Did she know about Jack? Elise did not fill the space with weighted words. She took a breath that sounded like she had been waiting to be asked. 2 years ago, she said, Brooke became a historian for our family. She brought a tiny recorder to Sunday dinners. She asked Conrad about that night. He told her what he tells when he tells it all. She took notes that looked like homework. Later, she asked about the scars. She had seen your husband at a distance once at the school concert. She said it was nothing. She said not to get excited. I did not know she hired anyone. Private investigator, I said. She did. Elise was quiet, then she whispered a curse at herself. Of course she did. We met Conrad 2 days later in a River North coffee shop that smelled like citrus and varnish. The tables were thick wood with dramatic grains. He had a folder on the table in front of him, and both hands on either side of it like he was holding a map flat in the wind. I am not investigating you, he said to Jack the moment we sat. I am investigating my daughter. He pushed the folder across. The paper smelled like ink and envelope glue. On top was a business card for a man named Kurt Lawson. There were printouts behind it. A still frame from a video of a community woodworking fair where Jack had been speaking blown up and cropped to a close study of his hand as he lifted a piece of cedar. The riffling ridges of the scar were unmistakable. There were emails to a therapist that read like strategy notes. There was a bank statement that showed a withdrawal of $15,000 from a family trust and a line item labeled renovation that did not match any permit pulled at Ethan's address. Conrad watched us read. He rubbed a thumb over a crease in the table, working at it as if it mattered that the line should be smooth. She paid him to find you, he said, knuckles gone bloodless on the table edge. Then she paid him for silence. Jack turned a page that showed a list titled Boundaries. Under it were quiet instructions for how to make it harder for a son to visit his parents without saying no. The list read like the staging notes for a dinner party, where the point was emptiness. I took out my phone and snapped 2 photos quick, the angle poor because I was afraid the folder could vanish. This is not on you, I said to Conrad. It is, he said. He looked older in the good light. The silver of his hair flashed under the high windows. I taught her to care about how we look. I did not teach her enough about why that is not the same as who we are. Jack reached into his pocket and rolled something in his palm, the way a person holds a small stone to remind his hand it is his. He did not put it on the table. I knew it by the quiet tap inside his fist. The coin he had carried for decades was smooth at the edge where his thumb had polished it over and over without thinking. We tell Ethan, I said. No more letting this be an unlit room. Jack nodded without looking up. That night Ethan called us before we could call him. His voice sounded thin, like he had been breathing the narrow air you get in a stairwell. Come over, he said, please. The house was dark except for the kitchen. He had set his laptop on the island. The screen showed Brooke in a hotel room with a pale beige wall and a print that looked like it was trying to be art without making anyone feel anything. She had a glass of Pinot and her makeup set perfect on her face under lighting that made everything seem like velvet except the eyes. Since you will not answer, her recorded voice said, I'm sending this. I know your father-in-law's story. I know your mother's part in it. It is time you know it too. Ethan clicked play and then stood back, arms folded like he did not trust himself to sit down. I stood beside Jack and felt the heat from the dishwasher cycle puff out from the vent at the base of the cabinet. Brooke did not raise her voice. She did not have to. She had the calm she keeps for rooms where she thinks the furniture will obey. Your father did not simply choose to quit drinking, she said. He ended up in the hospital 3 times. He lied to his employer about the absences. Your mother lied to you about where he was. She called it flu. She called it overtime. I have the records. She held up papers in the frame, names and dates, the Northwestern logo. It made the kitchen feel too small. Jack took a breath and let it out like he was holding a cup level while walking on a floor that shook. He did not look at Ethan. He looked at the steam that had fogged a circle on the upper cabinet near the hood. Brooke lifted the glass of wine to her lips and gave the camera a small smile that did not carry to her eyes. If you decide to choose them, she said, remember that I offered to protect our kids. Remember who told the truth. Ethan stopped the video without a word. He closed his eyes and pressed his fingers to the lids as if trying to erase an image. When he opened them, they were wet. I do not care about the hospital records, he said to Jack, and his voice broke on care. I care that you are here. I care that you stayed. Jack swallowed and nodded. He set his hand on the island. The light above us found the raised rivers of his skin and made thin shadows a map in relief. The next morning, my phone would not stop. Messages from numbers I did not know. A friend from the hospital sending a link with a warning. Brooke had posted an essay with a photo where Jack's scars were caught in hard kitchen light. The caption that sat under the picture used the words safe and history and protect. The comments multiplied. I did not read them all. I read enough to feel my throat close. My supervisor called and asked me to come in. She poured me coffee I did not want and said the board had questions about judgment and disclosure. She said she was on my side. She kept her hand on my wrist while she said it, and it should have helped more than it did. That evening Conrad called. He did not ask. He did not hedge. He said 4 words that sounded like he had rehearsed them not because he doubted them, but because he wanted them to land true. Press conference, and he said, "My building tomorrow." I looked at Jack. He was in the doorway to the garage. The curls of oak shavings around his boots held the light like halos. He touched the rim of the bookshelf where his pencil had sketched a small constellation, and then wiped his hands clean on a rag he kept in his back pocket. "We are done hiding," Conrad said into my ear. I walked to the front window and pulled the curtain aside. Our own glass gave me our faces back, mine in front, Jack behind me. The city lights made a double of us. The reflection wavered when a bus went by and the window trembled. I let the curtain fall. The house smelled like cedar and cinnamon and the cold that comes in when you open a door too often in winter. The lobby at Davenport Capitol was all glass and clean lines. Light came through the atrium and through white squares across polished stone. Reporters gathered under the mezzanine with microphones that looked like flowers on long stems. Conrad stood behind a table with a small stack of paper and a remote. His tie was neat. His hands were not. Jack took the side wall near a ficus away from the lenses. He did not hide behind it. He just chose a place that felt like shade. I stood with him and could see the reflection of the room in the glass behind Conrad. The reflection made everyone look a little taller and thinner, like a version of themselves that had decided to be better at standing. Conrad pressed the remote and a screen woke. A black and white photo filled it. A brick facade, fire damage above third-floor windows, a date stamped in the corner, then a map of Pilsen with a red circle, a copy of a hospital admission form with his own name and a burn unit note. A photo of a set of back stairs that had rotted out long ago, the wood chewed soft by time. He did not raise his voice. He did not rehearse a tone. He just told what he could. He named the year and the address. He talked about a boy who came through smoke and a back staircase that failed a breath after it was used. He said the search that followed had been a habit that became a duty and never left him. He held up his hand when a reporter stepped forward with a question about Brooks' post. He looked at the cameras like he was looking at people and not machines. "Gratitude is not blindness," he said. "I checked. I spoke to those who know him. I am not asking you to love a story. I am asking you to look at a person." When the first questions came, he answered what he could and declined what he could not. A few microphones angled toward Jack. Jack shook his head once and offered his hand to Conrad instead. The handshake was quick and full. Then we left through a side door into winter light that sat pale and careful on the loop. By evening, I held my phone in my palm and watched the comment tide pull out. A news site ran a small feature about a rescue in 1969 and a search that finally ended. Strangers who had said ugly things under Brooks' essay deleted their words or replaced them with other words. There were messages from people I knew and from people I barely did. My supervisor sent a short email. "Take a few days. We will handle the board." The hearing was set fast. The courthouse room was small and had the worn carpet and humming vent of rooms that do work that is not pretty. Brooke sat on one side in a navy dress with her hair pulled back. She had the expression she uses when she introduces a keynote speaker. Ethan sat with Carla Nguyen and did not look at his wife. He looked at the table in front of him like he could read the grain and find a road. Carla stood and set the tone with one sentence that fit the room. "We are here on an emergency motion that has no emergency." Brooks' lawyer called a psychologist who spoke in generalities about stress and relapse. He talked about statistics in a voice that had seen a lot of courtrooms. He had not met Jack. He did not say that out loud. He did not have to. Carla brought out records that showed 45 years of sobriety. She did not pile them high. She turned them so the judge could see each date slide into the next decade. She called Mike Rizzo, who walked to the stand with his shoulders round from years of lifting drywall. His hands were nicked. He sat and used the kind of words a man uses who does not like extra sugar in anything. "He showed up," Mike said. "He kept showing up. He sat next to people who were mean to themselves and did not make it about him. He is the guy you call when you do not want talk. He sits and waits until you can." Carla called Conrad. He kept it short. He said who he was. He said what Jack did. He said he trusted him with his own grandchildren if he had any. His mouth went tight when he stepped down. When Brooke's lawyer argued that a person who runs into fire may be reckless in other rooms, Carla did not raise her voice. "That is not recklessness, that is an act of care," she said. "You have testimony, photographs, video, and years that show how he behaves with children who are his heart." Judge Merritt watched each of us the way a person watches faces at a porch light, one by one, making sure there is no trick in the eyes. She asked a question about the hospital records from years ago. She looked at the psychologist and asked if he had met Jack or the grandchildren. He said no, and it sounded like a small word that should have been larger. When the judge spoke, it was flat, which is how words land when they are meant to stay put. "There is no basis for an emergency order," she said. "There is evidence of a long period of sobriety, a bonded relationship with the grandchildren, and attempts to interfere with that relationship. The motion is denied." The air changed. The room did not move, but our breath did. Jack's hand went to his pocket. I saw the coin with his year pressed thin by his thumb. He rubbed its edge once and let it go. We walked out into a hall that smelled like coffee from a machine and a floor cleaned too often. Robert put a hand on Jack's shoulder and left it there. Ethan took a breath that shook and then stopped shaking. Carla allowed herself a half smile that went away when she saw reporters outside and set her head for that. That night, Ethan ordered pizza because that is what he knows to do when there is no time to cook. Ava spread paper on the table and drew. She did not draw a tree or a snowman. She drew her grandfather's hand and the lines in it. She took a gold gel pen from a school kit and traced the ridges like rivers. She looked up at Jack and grinned with her whole face. "It looks like treasure," she said. Jack laughed, and the sound landed low. He bent his head and pretended to study where she had added little stars around the edges. The kitchen light caught the gel ink and made it shine. Leo put a sticker of a small dog in the corner and called it a guard. We ate at the island. The smoke alarm in the hall gave a lazy chirp. No one got the ladder. Jack kissed the top of Ava's head when he stood up to take plates to the sink. The room felt large and simple. The next morning the phone rang early. I wiped my hands on a towel and grabbed its still-tasting coffee. "Ethan," I said. "She's gone," he said, and there was nothing else in his voice. "Mom, she took them." We drove to Ethan's with the heater on full blast and did not feel warm. The house looked the same from the street. Inside, the children's boots were gone from the mat, coats gone from the hooks. The bedrooms had that hollow feeling you get after suitcases leave. A pencil lay on Ava's desk and had rolled to the floor. Leo's bed had a dip where a hand had pressed the quilt and then gotten up in a hurry. The air held a trace of Brooke's perfume and something acrid from a curling iron left on and then turned off mid-curl. Ethan was already on with the police. He had his laptop open to a folder of court documents. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. He had learned to make his sentences land on the right words. I stepped into the hall and called Elise. She answered on the first ring. The sound behind her was an echo of tile in a kettle that had just boiled. "She took them," I said. Elise inhaled once, slow and sharp. "There is a family place," she said. "Wyoming, Wind River Range. My in-laws kept a cabin up there. Brooke loved it as a girl. If she had a key, she would have kept it under the top drawer in her old desk. I am going to check her room. I will call you back." She hung up without goodbye. I walked back to the kitchen. Ethan's hand shook, and he set it flat on the island to steady it. Jack stood very still. He had that old look that came when the air in a room felt like it could thin without warning. He slid his hand into his pocket and found the coin. He did not bring it out. He just let it center him by being a small, honest weight. Elise called 10 minutes later. "The key is gone," she said, "and I found something else. Nora, there is a journal. It is not a diary. It is a plan. I will scan pages and send them. Some are lists. Some are flow charts." She wrote the word phase at the top of one and drew arrows. There are initials that match a therapist. There is a name I do not know. Kurt something. "Kurt Lawson," I said. "She hired him." Elise made a sound in her throat like a thing breaking inside something softer. "I am emailing now. I have also sent the address for the cabin to Ethan." The file landed in Ethan's inbox while she spoke. He turned the screen so we could see. Brooke's handwriting was neat and upright. She had written headers like a teacher making a rubric. Boundaries, distance, narrative. Under each she had bullet lines in ink that did not blot where it touched the paper. seat at far end, lighting excuses, make separate holidays, then pages where her tone changed to clinical. If father finds rescuer, express surprise pivot to protect children, language raise concerns about instability. There were dates beside some items and check marks when she felt she had succeeded. I flipped to the scan of the last page. It had an outline titled, "If Pressure Escalates." Under it, she had noted options: temporary relocation, alternate school IDs, new therapists for documentation. She had written names of cities in the margin in pencil and erased two so hard the paper had thinned. One that remained was Seattle. Ethan forwarded the cabin address to the police. He put the phone on speaker. A woman at dispatch said she would contact the county sheriff near Wind River. The call ended with workmanlike promises. It felt like we had handed a piece of our heart to a system on tracks and told it to go faster than it was built to go. Snow was blowing sideways across the porch when the call from Wyoming came back through. A deputy said the cabin sat empty now, but had been used this week. Food in the refrigerator, a grocery receipt from a market in Riverton, tucked under the magnet that held a postcard. 2 beds slept in, and one made up that morning without care. A mug in the sink with a milky ring. On the counter, a note propped against a sugar canister. The deputy read it in the flat voice people use when they do not want a sentence to look bigger than it is. "You chose him, now you do not get to choose them." "It is for Conrad," Elise said from a second line she had joined. "She is using my husband as a weapon against my husband." The deputy said they would send the note for Prince, but that paper had its own mind when it came to sharing secrets. He said there were tire tracks back out to the road, and a mark on the dirt where someone had turned around in a hurry when they realized they had forgotten something and then not come back to fetch it. We did not sleep that night. Jack went to the garage at 2 and turned on the small heater that looked like an old orange glow. He planned the edge of the bookshelf and left curls of oak on the floor. The smell of cedar hid in his sleeves and came back to bed with him for an hour. He got up again at 5. The call that changed the shape of the morning came from a number I did not know. I almost did not answer. A clear voice spoke my name and then asked for Ethan. I put it on speaker and set the phone on the island in the same place where the laptop had sat for Brooke's video. "My name is Dr. Maya Ortiz," the voice said. "I am a child psychologist in Seattle. I have Ava and Leo in my office. They are safe." Ethan leaned both hands on the island and closed his eyes. His chest lifted once like a diver breaking the surface. He was silent for 3 beats and then said thank you like a prayer. Dr. Ortiz explained the rest without drama. A woman had brought the children for an evaluation and used a last name that did not match the insurance card. She wanted documentation that would support a claim that the children feared their grandfather. The children had sat on her rug and told a different story in careful voices. Ava had asked politely if she could call her dad. Dr. Ortiz had excused herself to the hall, dialed the police, and then dialed us. "They are drinking cocoa," she said. "Ava has drawn a hand with gold lines. She says it is her grandfather's. She says he smells like cedar, and he listens." Jack made a sound that had no word attached to it. He sat down on the nearest chair because he did not trust his legs to keep their place under him. Seattle police picked Brooke up at a coffee shop on Capitol Hill an hour later. The charge on the paper said custodial interference. The words lived in the wrong shape for what had been done, but the officers had time to make the paper fit more words when they brought her back. Dr. Ortiz put the children on a flight with a social worker who had a calm face and a bag of snacks. We drove to O'Hare and stood at the gate like people who have left luggage on a train and now see it rolling back to them. Ava spotted Jack first. She did not look left or right. She ran straight into him and climbed his lap where he sat in a chair he had taken so he would be at her height. She put her arms around his neck and pressed her face to his skin. She did not have to reach far. He lowered his head and made a shelter of his shoulder. Leo reached them next and wrapped his arms around both sets of ribs and squeezed with all the strength in a 7-year-old frame. Ethan put a hand on all 3 and bent his head into the circle. People walked around us the way you walk around a small miracle you did not expect to see in an airport, and you are not sure you're allowed to look at it directly. Back at the house, the quiet had changed. The rooms felt like they were moving with us instead of watching. The afternoon light went gray and then blue. The smoke alarm gave its thin chirp, and Ethan finally got the ladder and fixed the battery, and the chirp stopped. It felt like something you reconcile with when you get serious about living. The district attorney filed charges that read longer than one sheet. The trial date came fast for a case that would usually wait. Journal pages photographed and authenticated. Emails between Brooke and the therapist printed and slotted into binders with tabs. The fake school paperwork from Seattle spread out on a table like a small museum exhibit of a story that had almost worked. Jack did not want to go. He said the courthouse had too much air that is not for breathing. He did not ask not to be called. He just looked at Conrad when Conrad asked and nodded once. The courtroom for the criminal case was larger than the one for the hearing. It had wood that was more serious and microphones that were closer to mouths. The jury sat with their hands folded and their faces doing the thing faces do when strangers tell them what happened and they have to decide the exact names for it. The prosecutor kept her voice even. She walked the jury through the plan with a line and a pencil, not a floodlight. A page from the journal that read, Project Untether. A bill from Kurt Lawson. A screen cap of an email where Brooke used phrases like control the frame and minimize variables and used the names of her own children like pieces on a board. Dr. Ortiz took the stand and spoke about what the children had said and how their bodies had looked while they said it. She described Leo's hand on his sister's knee like a steadying weight. She described the way Ava's voice changed when she said cedar. Brooke's lawyer stood and offered his version with the smoothness of a person who collects smoothness as a craft. He did not deny the documents. He placed them in a different arrangement and invited the jury to look again. He said a mother can be wrong and still be a mother who is trying to protect. He introduced a psychiatric evaluation from 46 years ago that listed depression and anxiety and trauma and placed it alongside a page from an old intake that had inaccurate boxes checked. He asked if a man who had struggled then could be trusted now under pressure. He called me. He asked if my husband had ever lied. I said he had lied to stay employed when he was sick decades ago. He asked if I had lied. I said I had and said what I had called those nights. I did not defend what we had done. I did not apologize for a thing that had already been forgiven in the only rooms that mattered to me. He thanked me for my honesty like he had gotten what he had come for. He called Conrad. He asked if gratitude can hide other truths. Conrad said gratitude can make you dig until you know which truths are yours to carry and which have been thrown at you by someone with a different purpose. He did not raise his tone. Carla stood and did not move her hands when she spoke. She did not narrate feelings for the jurors. She let the documents do that. She brought out the exit sign photos from the Seattle school and the charter papers with the false names. She brought out the Riverton receipt and put it next to the Wyoming note. She saw the jurors look from the word you wrote on the note to the word you used in an email about not letting a grandfather touch Holiday. She did not point at the comparison. She gave them the lines and let them draw. Ava testified with a small, clear voice that understood the size of rooms. She sat with her sneakers barely touching the bar under the chair and spoke into a microphone that made her sound too big for her own face. She said Grandpa smells like his shop and that he reads the words on a page the way some people read a map, and you do not get lost when he does that. She said he never shouts. She said he listens until she is done, even when she is not sure what she is trying to say. She said her mother told her to be afraid, and she tried but could not find the place where the fear was supposed to go. Brooke watched her daughter and did not blink. Her jaw set at an angle I had seen on holidays when she could not make a napkin lay flat. On the last day, the prosecutor asked one question too many, and the judge asked the jury to step out while the lawyers worked a point. The room shifted when the jurors left. The air got looser like a belt had been undone on a stomach that had been holding itself in. Brooke stood without instruction. It was not her turn. She looked straight at Jack and spoke in a voice that did not crack or carry heat. It was cold and flat and carried like a note played on a metal instrument. "You should have stayed in that building," she said. "Everything would be better." The sound in the room came all at once, a single intake from a dozen throats. The judge rapped her gavel and told the deputy to sit Brooke down. Conrad's face lost its blood and then got it back. Elise put a hand on his forearm and did not speak. Ethan bowed his head like a man in a church who has just heard the wrong prayer and is trying to find the right one inside himself. Jack did not say anything for a long breath. When he did not try to make the words carry weight. He let them be no more and no less than what they were. "I hope you find a way to stop hurting people," he said. The jury filed back in and sat. The judge told them to disregard the outburst. She gave them the law in a tidy basket of sentences and sent them to the small room where people go to decide what a word like harm means in a place where words are supposed to be measured. The door to the jury room shut and made a soft click. The clock on the back wall hummed. The fluorescent lights buzzed at a high pitch that only some ears hear. Jack sat down beside me and folded his hands on his knees. His thumb found the smooth edge of the coin in his pocket and turned it once. The air held still the way a house does in winter when windows are closed and the furnace keeps its promise, and all you can hear for a moment is your own breath going in and out. The jury came back in a line, faces steady and unreadable. The foreman stood. Paper rustled. Words landed that had only one meaning in that room. Guilty on each count. A small sound moved through the benches, more breath than voice. Brooke kept her chin where she had fixed it. She looked past us at a point that did not exist in the room. Ethan's hand closed around the edge of the bench until the knuckles went pale. Jack did not move. He looked at the place on the table where sunlight from a high window made a thin white square on the wood. 2 weeks later, the courtroom was fuller. Reporters sat in the back in neat rows. Judge Merritt read the file, set it down, and looked at Brooke. The judge spoke in the same measured tone she had used since the first hearing. The sentences had weight because they were built to carry it. 7 years. Custodial rights restricted. Any contact to be supervised after evaluation. A record entered that used the words coercive and alienation without drama. The clerk noted each line. The bailiff waited. Brooke refused to meet our eyes. She asked to speak. The judge allowed it. Brooke stood and did not cry. She lifted her chin another notch and said she had tried to keep standards in a house that had none. The sound of it did not touch the wood in any place that mattered. The bailiff took her by the arm. The door closed behind her with a soft click that carried. Outside the building, the air had a clean cold that felt like a new page. Cameras faced the steps. Microphones lifted. Carla told Jack he did not have to say anything. Jack nodded and walked to the stand anyway. He looked taller on the stone. Winter sun caught the lines on his skin and lit them in a way that made them look carved and deliberate. "I was a kid," he said. There was smoke and someone called out. I did what I could. I did not run in to be called anything. I went because there was not a door and someone needed one. He touched his cheek lightly with his fingertips as if checking he was still there. "These are a map. They tell where I have been. They brought me to a long table with people I love." That was all. He stepped away. Conrad met him halfway down the steps and pulled him into an embrace that was not careful. Elise stood beside them, eyes bright. Reporters kept speaking into the air after the two men had already moved past. Winter shifted to spring and then to the slow heat of a Chicago summer. By the time the cold came back, the house had a different weight to it. Ethan strung warm lights around the window and did not leave a gap at the top like he had last year. Ava helped by holding the end and instructing where the hook should go. Leo put the small dog sticker back on a new drawing in the kitchen and announced that the guard had returned to his post. Jack finished the bookshelf in the garage and rubbed the cedar rail with oil until it gleamed. He carved small constellations along the top, tiny stars linked with shallow cuts. He lifted the piece with Ethan and set it in Ava's room against a wall that had stickers from a younger year. Ava ran her fingers over the tiny dots and traced the lines. "It looks like the sky remembered where it was," she said. The next afternoon, the smoke alarm chirped one soft note from the hall and then stayed silent because Ethan had already changed the battery. The house smelled like cinnamon and orange peel. The oven door opened and a cloud of heat washed out and fogged the window for a breath. The children shouted that the cookies were ready and then argued gently about who would take the first one that broke. People filled the front room in a way that felt simple. Conrad arrived with Elise and set a tin on the island with neat cookies in rows. Mike Rizzo brought a loaf wrapped in a paper bag and pretended he had baked it, then admitted he had traded for it and laughed at himself. Carla stopped at the door and shook snow from her coat and took off her shoes by habit under the brass sign. She kissed my cheek as if she had always done it. At the long table, the candles stood at attention and threw small halos against the glass. The card that once said head was gone. Jack took the chair anyway with his usual small pause. Ethan and I sat on either side. Ava was across from him, Leo beside her, with a hand already reaching for the basket of rolls. Ava rose and held her juice in both hands. She looked at the table as if praying, then at Jack as if telling a secret. "To Grandpa Jack," she said, "my brave map." Glasses lifted and clicked. Jack lowered his eyes the way men do when someone shines a light and it is kind. He swallowed. He started to speak and then did not. He smiled instead and it reached the corners. Later, I took a plate to the sink and looked up. The window was closed. The glass showed the room back to me. In it, we were doubled soft around the edges. Jack's profile was clear. The lines on his cheek looked like the thin gold Ava had drawn months ago. The room held cinnamon and cedar in the same breath. On the wall near the hallway, Ava's picture of a hand with gold rivers hung in a cheap frame that made the lines shine more than any frame that cost 10 times as much. The house was warm, the alarms were quiet, the table was full. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.